Welcome to Season 3 of The Dirt on Organic Farming, a podcast from Oats, the Organic Agronomy Training Service. I'm your host, Nate Powell-Palm. It's no surprise that at Oats, we advocate for organic agriculture. But we also recognize there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and organic farming may not be for everyone. Our farmer in this episode tried an organic system on his 200 acres in Manitoba, and it didn't end up working for him. But along the way, he learned about seeking advice and finding the right resources and advisors, which is key to any organic journey. So here's a little bit about our next guest, Don Rourke.
Well, my name's Don Rourke. I farm at Minto, Manitoba, which is in Southwest Manitoba. I used to farm with my parents. We've since divided the farm, but we farmed 5,000 acres organically for quite a few years. We grew a variety of things. Our biggest cash crop was wheat, and then soybeans. We had some success with yellow mustard. I believe we grew some transition barley, which there actually was a bit of a market for underneath non-pesticide type products. Now I farm 2,000 acres. Mom and dad and I both went back to conventional farming. We weren't having great success.
Don shared a few of the obstacles he faced once he transitioned to organic. One issue was that he had to find new markets that weren't close by.
We got into organic after looking at it for quite a few years. We ran the numbers, and the numbers looked good. The numbers, once we got into organic, didn't really change. The economics were still there. I don't think we had any other problems than anybody else has in organic. The biggest problem we had was just location. Our wheat was being shipped to Quebec. That's where we could find the best and most consistent market for it. Soybeans, we were hauling them 10 hours south down towards Minneapolis, which was a lot of time and fuel. I lived out of a semi for a long time. It's not something I wanted to do, but that's what happened.
And his buyers did not make things easier.
We have something up here in Canada called the Canada Grain Commission. All the main buyers are listed with the Canada Grain Commission, and they have a bond. So if they go bankrupt, the delivered grain that hasn't been paid out is technically insured. Our largest buyer of wheat was not listed with Canada Grain Commission. We looked into private insurance, which they would have had to share their books with the insurance company, and they flat out refused. So there was red flags. There's enough red flags that you can make a pretty scarf with them, which isn't a good thing, right?
Enough red flags to make a scarf with. Oof, I'm going to use that. So the market access wasn't great for Don, and then he struggled with the weeds in a very dry climate.
We tried to do the zero-till organic stuff. We couldn't seem to make that work. We had every single piece of specialty equipment as far as tillage and harrows. We had an electric weeder, a Lasco zapper. We kind of tried everything. And at the end of the day, we just weren't winning. The weeds were getting ahead of us. We're in a climate where we can be fairly dry. We're actually in a bit of a drought right now. And for organic, you really need all the stars to align. If once you cultivate it once or twice and get a good stale seed bed, you've killed that first flush of weeds. You don't want it to rain till your crop's up. Yeah, it's challenging. It's very challenging. When we were going in the spring, we'd have 8 tractors rolling at once. Usually 2 drills, maybe a planter, cultivators, harrowing. It was a lot of management.
But there are some obstacles he did manage to find solutions for. When he was organic, Don was using a rotation of green manure, wheat, and soybeans. The wheat was great. The soybeans, not so much.
So we grew fantastic wheat. Fantastic wheat. It was weed free. People thought it was conventional wheat. Soybeans, which there's lots of soybeans growing in the area, but of course we had to grow non-GMO soybeans. There's really nobody been breeding for US viewers. We're a 000 heat unit or whatever it is. They're short season beans. Typically, historically, our first frost is September 15th. So there are very, very few conventional varieties of soybeans. Nobody is breeding for all the good things you would want in soybeans. So high pod height, season, high yielding, just nobody's doing it. So we had to use what we could get. So there's kind of strike one. The biggest make or break thing in soybeans, and it doesn't matter how you're growing them in Manitoba, and it doesn't matter where you are in Manitoba, is an August rain. It typically does not rain here in August. I don't think for the last 3 years it hasn't rained in August, which is good for getting wheat off in good quality, but for filling soybeans, not so much. First year, we just sowed them with a drill. We harrowed them. They were just an absolute disaster, but we still got them off, got them cleaned, sold them. I think year two, we went and bought a 24 row 30-inch planter. We had a camera guided hitch, planted them, harrowed them before they come up, and started row crop cultivating. And between the rows was beautiful. There's no weeds, but there was considerable amount of weeds. And the biggest problem was from the time that they're at the crook stage, just about to come out of the ground, to I think it's first trifoliate, you can't harrow. You can't drive on them, and it doesn't matter if they're conventional or organic. You can't roll them. Like they're just, you do not go out there.
Don is looking at those weedy rows of soybeans and is all out of ideas. But then he crosses paths with a mysterious man who offers him a little well-timed advice.
I think it was a guy that I found down, I heard him at the conference down in La Crosse. And I went back the next year and specifically looked for him, and I found him. I don't remember his name. I think he's from Minnesota. He had glasses and he walked with a bit of a limp.
Sounds a little like the beginning of a Sherlock Holmes mystery. Cue a foggy night on a cobblestone street. But really, it was probably a hotel conference hall.
We talked about row crop cultivating, and the other problem we have up here is we have rocks. That's not great because when you're shaving the ground, because your soybean varieties, the pods are so low to the ground, that's the best we could do. And then you go and row crop cultivate them. You bring up all the rocks and they're just sitting in the rows. Like, God, that was when we were on combines. But he suggested, I'm going to call it a diamond harrow, and that's what we used. It was a rigid tooth harrow. He didn't use a diamond. It was kind of like a diamond, but they're connected with a chain, so they do follow the ground a little bit better. And he said, right about the crook stage, just when they're cracking the soil, he would go out with a diamond harrow and very, very slowly harrow the entire field. And it would dry out that top 3/4 of an inch and get all those weed. Like you wanted to do it also on a warm, sunny day so that you just rip those little weeds out. Because that was our problem. From the time we harrowed after planting to, well, first trifoliate, essentially, we couldn't do anything. Well, up here, that's weeks. So if you get a rain in there, you just get a whole flush of weeds. And I assume all soybeans are about the same. They just take so long to get going, and especially on 30-inch rows. We went with 30-inch rows because it's a lot easier to find planter, row crop cultivators. Tractor tires are a lot easier to fit in 30-inch rows. And then, of course, our land isn't flat. It's flat, but we've got lots of drainage ditches, especially at home where mom and dad are. You know what? Around here, nobody has row crop this. I had to learn all of this.
It's no walk in the park working out all these kinks, especially if you are the only farm in your area using that type of system. But back to that mystery man from Minnesota.
So getting back to that guy, that was the only time I ever heard of that idea. We did it. There's diamond harrows around. We got a 120-foot diamond harrow. And it wasn't hard. Like I think we did 4.5 mile an hour, something like that. You could get up to like 5. And it worked really, really well. If you went too fast, it would pop the beans out. But yeah, it worked really, really well. So our last year, we had by far our best yielding soybeans.
It is an amazing feeling when you find that missing piece that makes it work. In the few years that Don's farm was organic, there were ups and downs, wins and losses, and so many learnings. At the end of the day, he felt it took more management of equipment and employees than he cared for. So maybe it's not for Don, and that's okay. But for other organic farmers out there, Don's takeaways from this experience is go find those solutions. Go to conferences, join online and in-person groups, ask around. There's a good chance someone has faced a similar issue to you and has probably come up with a creative solution.
There are so many answers out there to questions on organic farming. They are out there. I'm just thinking of a guy now. He's out of Wisconsin. I can't remember his name.
Don is clearly not good with names.
He's wrote a couple books. He was a huge resource. I went and saw him at that conference in La Crosse a couple times. If you're doing tillage, the old guys, 70 plus, they did that because they didn't have chemicals. They knew how to do that. That's how they farmed. There's lots of answers to questions out there. You just got to look for them. Well, and even as far as, say, leveling a cultivator. If your cultivator isn't leveled, don't leave the yard. Leveling it on cement is not the same as leveling it in the field. Depending on what it is, wheels will sink, soft, this, that. It's very important to know what you're doing with the iron you have. We borrowed a piece of equipment to try it from another organic guy, and I think I went about 100 feet. Got out and looked, and went a little bit more, and I got out and looked. I got my hired man to drive, and I rode on the frame. That was kind of my famous thing. Get somebody else to drive it. Ride on the frame so you can see what's happening. And I called him and I said, "Is this thing set up right? Like the spacing?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "I don't think it is." And he'd had it for a very long time, and it was leaving a couple strips. So even when they're new, so you really got to get down and dig, pay attention. But I don't know. I kind of like to go to the lake, and I've got a Harley. We have a short season up here. There's only time to ride a bike so much.
Well, Don, I really can't fault you for wanting to get out there on that bike during that very short Manitoba summer. The lake sounds pretty nice too. Farming, and especially organic farming, can be time intensive, but making it a priority to share those experiences and find space to ask questions could be the difference between a weedy or flourishing soybean crop. So get on out there. Thanks for tuning in to Season 3 of The Dirt on Organic Farming, a podcast by the Organic Agronomy Training Service. Oats provides training to agronomists, advisors, and crop consultants so that farmers will have better access to reliable, science-based advice for their unique farm operation. Special thanks in this episode goes to Don Rourke. This episode was produced by Blue Canoe Studios. For more information, go to www.organicagronomy.org. Oats is a programmatically independent consortium that is fiscally sponsored by the Organic Trade Association. Oats is supported in part with funding from OTA membership companies. Season 3 of The Dirt on Organic Farming is made possible by support from the Organic Center and FAR, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, under award number TOCFFAR-EXD-002. The content of this publication is solely the responsibility of the authors and does not necessarily reflect the official views of the Organic Center and the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. I'm Nate Powell-Palm. Till next time, thanks for listening.